I guess like outside of the presentation, I wear a lot of different hats in the aging space. I'm definitely huge on what like Nancy had mentioned. It's like I am a huge aging and disability advocate. I definitely like to challenge the status quo, engage in more conversations on ableism and how to make things more equitable for the aging space, which ultimately affects all of us. And that's something I realize it is an intersection that we all cannot deny. It is a universal experience that we will share eventually, either if not now, in the future. And we all are also a part of the different spaces that we do our, we're all here for, I guess it's like we're a part of YPSS for a reason. We are all serving seniors at our own capacities. And that's just kind of like me in a nutshell. I don't want to spoil too much because I do have more of my background that's in the presentation itself. So I'll just kind of move on to that direction. So if I can actually have the enable for screen share, that would be great.
Got that, Michael?
Absolutely. Hold on one quick second. Does it allow you now, Emily?
Let me try it. Yes, it does. And I apologize, everyone, I'm not on camera because although I am a millennial, I'm still trying to figure out how to do a presentation simultaneously, also having my presentation notes and also seeing everybody all in one space. I can only see the presentation on my side, so apologize ahead of time for that. So just officially wanted to say welcome everyone. It's actually a pleasure to have the opportunity here at YPSS to kind of share my personal experience and thoughts around the topics of gender and pronouns. We will have a Q&A section at the end of the presentation, so please hold those questions until then. And if there's any that does come up throughout the presentation, feel free to just throw it in the chat and then I can always just go back out once I'm done with the presentation itself. So, oops, hold on. Okay, so to begin this presentation, my name is Emily Yim Jung, and I use they, them pronouns. I am second generation Vietnamese American, and I also identify as both cisgendered female, but as well as queer. For those who are unfamiliar with the terminology cisgendered female, basically that's a term that describes a person who identifies based off of their gender identity markers that are given basically assigned at birth. So it's the terminology is sex assigned at birth. So I do identify as cisgendered female. And we'll kind of discuss more about this later on in the presentation. And that kind of leads us, in order to kind of prime us into the pronouns, is to kind of take some time to talk about gender identity. Social identity. So social identity, it allows people to be a part of group and gain a sense of belonging in their social world. These identities play an important role in shaping self-image. The more people identify with specific groups, the more the group plays a bigger role in shaping how you feel about yourself. So to the right, I kind of listed the big top like 8 socially constructed identities that we're all familiar with, which is like race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, abilities, religion, spirituality, nationality, and socioeconomic status. So before we move on to the conversation on gender and pronouns, I would like to take a few minutes to kind of share with everyone about this like social identity, because it does play a huge role into how we start talking about our own gender pronouns. So that leads to the next one. So who am I? I wear a lot of hats. And I say hats because I feel as humans, we kind of, like for me personally, I kind of adopted prior to moving down to San Diego in 2018. I did work as a nurse in an assisted living for about 6 years. And I realized after working as like a clinical director in Orange County in like several different communities and doing a lot of the policy work, I assumed just that role. and didn't really look into my own identity, didn't look into embracing my own cultural identity, right? And then my own sexual identity, and then also my educational identity. And so these are things that I've realized since coming down here into the progressive space in San Diego. I was able to kind of approach my identities as if they're different hats. So in a nutshell, I am a nurse who holds a residential care facility for the elderly administrative license. I also carry 6+ years of experience working as a clinical director in assisted living. In 2018, I took a break from working and went back to school to pursue higher education. And so I'm currently a student at SDSU, majoring in gerontology, minoring in Asian studies. I'm also a founder and president of the Intergenerational Gerontology Alliance on campus. It's a student-run organization that advocates for bridging SDSU students, alumni, and those interested in older adults with the aging community and the organizations in San Diego at large. And lastly, my last identity is I work for the city of Chula Vista, and my main focus is building, implementing, and evaluating age-friendly business program along with a toolkit that could be adopted to make our business sector more age-friendly as well. And then also reassessing the age-friendly Chula Vista Action Plan 2.0 version as well. So these identities are like my hats. So I'm able to wear any of them at any given time and don't necessarily choose to wear all the hats all at once anymore. So these hats actually allow me to kind of like engage in more meaningful conversations as I'm able to utilize my different identities to intersect conversations with others intentionally to bridge like a common ground. And so that's basically me in a nutshell. And I would love to connect with folks after the presentation with any questions related to all my other identities. And then a fun fact is because I do identify as a femme in the LGBTQ space, there's a picture of me this past Halloween where me and my partner actually gender swapped. And this is a great example of how our clothes can be seen by others or how it's perceived by others just based off of our normal, like, our normal gender norms of like females need to wear heels, wear makeup, look more feminine. And then males are more masculine, wearing, suits and ties and things like that. And this is like a great example of how you can see where our clothes is kind of like a gender expression in itself. So you are able to kind of swap if you wanted to, and it's okay. I feel like clothes are just a costume. Our identities are just more than just how we are like how we physically appear to others in general. So now that I have my introductions over, so I just wanted to go ahead and officially dive into gender pronouns and what they are. So similar to a person's gender expression that we previously discussed, gender pronouns are a part of the expression. Gender pronouns are terms that people use to refer to themselves that reflect their gender identity. This might be, you're familiar with like he, him, she, her, and sometimes there's actually gender neutral pronouns that are utilized like they, them. And in the same way, when we ask people for their name and we want to refer to them correctly, using gender pronouns refers to that particular person and honors them and their identity. So knowing and using a person's correct pronoun fosters inclusion. It makes a person feel more respected and valued, and ultimately affirms their gender identity. So remember that gender pronouns are always used in everyday speech and writing. We use gender pronouns in place of a person's name when referring to them. So for example, pronouns are used to refer either to ourselves, such as me and you, or to someone or something like she, it, them, or this. And to refer to people in sentences and conversations, we need to just be more intentional. So it's a good rule of thumb, what I've learned through this, I guess, gender journey and experience with pronouns. It's better to never assume a pronoun. It's always safer to utilize their name if you're ever in doubt. And so to the right, I kind of copied this from online. There's so many pronouns out there, to be very honest. These are more of the normalized pronouns are on the top, like the he or she, her, hers, he, him, they, them. The Z, zer, I've witnessed and utilized it here and there, but it's personal, it's very personalized. So depending on the person, they may say, oh, my pronouns are Z, zer, or the they, them, zir, which is the second to the last on the bottom. And the intentions is because we're coming from a binary spectrum, right? And what binary means is traditionally in society, we, at birth, if you're born with female genitalia, you're assumed she, her, hers, and then mom and dad likes to just put you in pink, right? Versus the boys are blue, and then girls are, gonna do more girly jobs, and boys will be doing more manly jobs. And so there's all these societal pressures and expectations that I like to just remind folks it's all a choice. We all don't have to assume those roles that were given to us at birth from society and from our parents, that we have that freedom to express ourselves whatever way it is that makes you feel whole and makes you feel complete. And so this is kind of why, like, I appreciate y'all just kind of coming through to learn more about the pronouns, because I feel like this is one of many identities that I know it's an evolving conversation, and I understand as allies we are doing our best to be more inclusive by utilizing pronouns. However, I do understand that there needs to be like an educational aspect of like, why do we need to do the pronouns, and be more intentional about that. So this kind of leads us next to when to use pronouns and how to use them. So traditionally, this is like an opportunity to inquire on someone's pronouns when it occurs during first meetings. And what I like to do traditionally is, in order to kind of cultivate a safe space, because some folks may not out themselves. Some people may not go like, hi, my name is so-and-so, my pronouns are he, him, his, because of how society is. Like, there's certain spaces where it may not be as safe and may not be as open and welcoming. And when folks from the queer community come in, there is a level of trauma that's there. So I traditionally, as an ally, I will come in and kind of break the ice myself. So I would just, introduce myself, say, hi, my name's Emily. My pronouns are she, her, hers. What are your pronouns, or which pronouns do you use to identify yourself? And there are some direct ways where if you're very direct and you kind of want to just be like, hey, I don't want to beat around the bush, you can ask directly saying, hey, what are your pronouns that you use? If you forget, you can always ask, say, hey, so-and-so, could you remind me real quick which pronouns you like to use again? It's okay to ask. I feel when you're it's like intentions versus impact. So if you're intentional about wanting to be inclusive, individuals like myself or my partner won't get upset for you messing up the pronouns. It's just taking more of the ownership, going like, oh, my bad, I'm still working on it, and just move forward. You don't need to necessarily say my bad and then give a long-winded answer as to why you forgot. It's like, just sweet and simple is usually the best practice, because as we're navigating it through the spaces, it is a challenge. And myself, I do understand that it's, grammatically, it may feel weird, it may sound weird, and it is a work in progress. And that's just something that's a part of just building ourselves into having a more intentional, inclusive way of communicating. So when a person presents their pronouns, this opportunity, it allows an opportunity to use their pronouns. So like I had mentioned before, it's usually in introductions, whether it's written or verbal. That's something that I also would remind folks too, is there's the verbal aspect of using specific pronouns, but also being intentional when you're writing about a person or introducing a person. Things like that too. So both written and conversation are both just as important. And then that kind of leads us into some tips for getting pronouns right. It's stuff that I already had kind of mentioned earlier in regards to how to go about pronouns. So, you never want to assume another person's gender pronouns. And it's important because you can't always know like what someone's gender pronouns are by just looking at them. So usually it's better to not assume and just ask. And the next one is just like we mentioned earlier, ask the person's gender pronoun. Asking about it and correctly using someone's gender pronoun is an easy way to show that, you know, you're holding safe space for them, but you also respect their identity. Sharing your own pronouns. This is actually something that I practice a lot, which is just normalizing sharing the gender pronouns, because it starts to kind of cultivate a space for inclusion, not only for yourself, but for others. Again, it's, you know, just as important as my pronouns are to me, like I also want to respect you and your own identities as well. So naming it and practicing it helps kind of cultivate that space of, hey, we're all on the same page. And as mentioned before, apologize if you call someone by the wrong pronoun. Mistakes happen. It can be difficult to adjust to using someone's correct pronouns. So if you accidentally misgender someone, just apologize, continue the conversation using the correct pronoun. Number 5 is avoid binary gendered language. So this is something that's also a work in progress. So myself, it's still really hard for me because I'm traditionally used to saying like, hey guys, how are you doing? And that's something that's really, I'm working intentionally to be like, okay, what are non-binary gendered language? So I would be like folks, students, colleagues, everyone. Those are words that are more gender neutral versus like ladies and gentlemen or boys and girls. So there are ways to navigate addressing like larger groups in a neutral way. I usually, my default is just folks. It's just straight to the point, or hey y'all, you know, today we're going to be doing whatever it is. So that's just kind of my strategy in regards to that. Number 6 is helping others. Basically, if you know of an individual who has specific pronouns and you're introducing them to, let's say, another colleague, and or you hear another colleague misgender one of your, you know, individuals in your space that has specific pronouns, that's definitely an opportunity for us to kind of be better allies, to share, and if anything, gently correct them and just say, hey, you know what, Emily's pronouns are they, them. They don't use she, her anymore. So just FYI, that's something that I usually will do if I hear if somebody is misgendered or the pronouns are being misused. Again, it's like, you know, to each their own, no pressure on that. I know there's some folks who are more open and forthcoming versus others. You may not be as comfortable, so it's okay. And then lastly, it's just practice, practice, practice. If you haven't necessarily used gender neutral pronouns such as like they, them, or Azizer before, give yourself that grace, give yourself that time to practice, and it's okay. Please don't feel a certain level of pressure to get things right overnight. Like I said, we've gone to school, we've learned that grammatically they, them may not necessarily make sense. So it's okay to just kind of continue and practice. I think that's what matters. At the end of the day is just having allies who are just being more intentional and mindful, rather than strive for perfection. And this kind of leads us into why stating pronouns matter. Here's just an image I found online that does a really good job stating why we do these types of like informative meetings. Number 1, it helps everyone feel included and respected. Number 2, it acknowledges someone's pronouns aren't assumed. The third one is it encourages folks to think about their own gender in itself. The fourth one is it's a way to show folks you're serious about being an ally. And lastly, it ensures folks get everyone's pronouns right. So that kind of leads me into the next area is what really happens when we don't care about pronouns. So you can always know what someone's gender pronouns are by just looking at them. Traditional ideas of how gender is displayed in society are changing every day. And by practicing mindfulness around pronouns, we create a more inclusive space. So mistaking and assuming people's pronouns without asking first mistakes their gender identity and actually sends a harmful message. Some personal, wouldn't be experiences, but some personal thoughts is, you know, what I've heard is like being misgendered or misnamed may leave a person feeling invalidated, dismissed, and at times it could be very distressing and threatening of their mental health, because we're looking at individuals who, let's say, are a part of like the trans community, and they were once assigned, you know, they were born as a female, but then they transitioned to a male. We don't want to necessarily misgender them because of the transition, and you seen, you know, maybe you knew Samantha as a female, but then they transitioned to a Sam. You know, we want to be more intentional about addressing them by their new identity, by their new expression, because, you know, there is some trauma that's related to our past identities, whether, you know, it's pretty much to each their own at this point. It's very personalized in regards to that. And then by discussing and making conscious efforts to use gender pronouns sets a tone of allyship. It can make a difference in developing trust with another person, especially someone that's from, let's say, the LGBTQIA space. And then another reason why it's important for pronouns is, like, especially for new community members that may feel particularly vulnerable in like let's say a very straight heteronormative space. Talking about pronouns kind of cultivates a, hey, you know, we're open, we're affirming, we want to like know your pronouns, and, you know, we do affirm that you do exist as another human being in the shared space. So as allies, we will typically be the majority in the room. So the simple action of taking time to introduce ourselves and learn about each other's pronouns sets the tone for the space to basically be inclusive of others. And some quick tips on how to take actions as allies. There's pronouns and email signatures definitely will help. And what I usually like to do is, in my signature, I'll put on the bottom like why pronouns and hyperlink articles and things like that to just kind of allow space for others to learn about it. So pronouns and email signatures show how email senders identify themselves and how they would like to be referred to in a third person. Using them in email signatures can also send a message that the company is inclusive of everyone and also acknowledges gender diversity. Another one would be great. I notice if y'all have like the social media, like I know Instagram usually offers it, and then I believe there's a couple other social media platforms that will allow you to be like select your gender pronouns. And that's also, again, it's an important move towards the real inclusivity of the workplace and wider society. And then lastly, what I mentioned earlier, just gender neutral language, incorporating the language in group settings instead of saying, hey guys, and welcome ladies, say welcome everyone, hello team. The simple change in language can make participants feel much safer to express themselves. And that leads us to the Q&A. So I know there was a lot, and I apologize if I spoke too quickly. I kind of have stage fright at the same time. But yeah, like this is a time where, you know, we've made it to the end, and I actually just wanted to hold space for folks to ask any questions, any concerns. The floor is open. Feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself, and I would love to be able to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Emily. You did such a good job.
Oh, thank you.
Just changed. I went on LinkedIn, and they do have that of changing, you know, adding pronouns. I'm going to be very vulnerable with this group, and Emily, I'm going to give our example if you don't mind.
Mhm.
Okay, so on, unfortunately, several occasions, I think it was like 3 or 4, we were having a committee meeting, and I was raised that you call people Miss and Mr. So there were, like I said, a couple times that when I was asking Emily something, I was saying Miss, and I really just felt super, I guess secure is the right way to describe it, of I caught myself every single time, even though I did it too many times. And I just said, I'm so sorry. And then one of the last times I went and stopped. So it was just a really great example of how I think this topic is so interesting. And even just talking to my parents about it, they still don't get it. My parents are very, very open, very welcoming people, but it's a generation thing. I just feel like this is something that's so challenging because it goes back to how we were raised, right? You know, I was raised to say sir. That's no longer, unless I know, right, that that's how they identify. I'm really working on not saying it. I have a silly question. And again, I'm just going to be totally vulnerable. So, Emily, I have seen people identify pronouns, and it is confusing to me. The pronoun is she/them. How do you address somebody with those pronouns? And please tell me somebody else has been confused by that too, so I don't feel as silly.
So don't worry, it is not silly at all. I can't speak on behalf of everybody in the community, but from my own personal experience, let's say my partner traditionally goes by they, them. They are female representing, however, they intentionally use they, she, because to be very honest, it's like, you know, we are mindful that they, them could be very challenging or could be challenging for folks in general. So they, she offers the ability to basically choose from the two, if that makes sense. And it's because, like, from my partner's standpoint, they eventually adopted the they, she, because not a lot of people, or not a lot of people, not a lot of allies within the community and outside the queer community were intentionally using they, them pronouns. So in order to kind of almost, I guess, like buffer and or alleviate some of the hurt that is associated by being misgendered, my partner adopted the they and the she, just in case people messed up and they're just like, oh, she, at least you mentally prepare yourself to be like, oh, you know, they refer to me she. And it's similar to like nicknames. Like, you know, we all have our own nicknames, and when our friends will call us different names in different spaces, it's very similar to pronouns too, in regards to that. So ideally, if it's the specific, if there's one type, then that's the go-to. If you see two different types, it's usually you'd be safe to use either or, from my personal experience. Yeah.
And it's probably okay to say that, you know, I see your pronouns are, you know, she, them. How would you like me to address you? Correct?
Yeah.
Awesome.
And it's always safe to just ask. And I think like we're in a space right now where it's better to ask than to assume. So there's never any stupid question. There's never, so never feel that way. I think it's just more of capacity. There's certain individuals, like for myself as an ally, I'm willing to challenge the narrative. I'm willing to also be able to engage in conversations because I have that mental capacity to sit down, slow down, talk about these important topics on behalf of my partner. However, there's other people who may not, if they're already handling their own personal mental disabilities, and you know, they're having to then also stop everything and just to explain, hey, this is why it's important to use my friend. You know, it is a bit much for certain individuals to engage in those types of conversations because it's hurtful and it's harmful. Like I've seen how my partner has talked about a lot of how it is to be misgendered, and because they're non-binary, they kind of look like in between where, you know, if they do dress up, you can see that they are female representing, but for the most part, you can just tell my partner is just like, oh, they are gay looking is usually what it is, but they're just like, they don't really know. Society's been asked like, oh, are you a boy or girl? And things like that are, you know, it becomes very hurtful and harmful for individuals who may just be like, you know what, I'm androgynous. I don't fit in the male or the female. I'm just me.
Yeah.
And just like taking people for who they are is the best approach, instead of saying, oh, well, you know, you should be looking more like this or more like that, because that's something that happens in like the lesbian space, for instance, where traditionally, if you looked in a very like hetero, like a straight lens, you would assume one partner is going to be more masculine, one partner is going to be more feminine.
Right.
But that's not the reality. That's just one type of, like, you know, it depends on each individual how they identify, but it's up to each person and themselves. So you know, it varies. It's very personalized. So don't ever, you know, give yourself that grace. It's a learning curve, and it's okay to mess up. Just take ownership of it and you're fine.
Yeah. Besides you helping me through that, I am obsessed with Jonathan Van Nuys, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they are identifying as they right now, but they're pretty fluid as well. So they do just a great job of explaining that and just saying, just ask. And then if you make a mistake, say, oops, sorry, and then move on. And I think besides pronouns, even just asking, especially our seniors, I've always been a big advocate about this, especially with those who have dementia. Asking how they want to be addressed is so important. Nothing makes my skin crawl a little bit more than when I'm walking through a community, and these memory care communities are filled with people who worked in NASA, football players, and I'm hearing them be called sweetie. And I know in a lot of cultures that's a term of endearment. But to me, I don't want to be called sweetie. If someone calls me sweetie, I'm ready to start swinging at you, like we're fighting. So it's just always so important to have that, and to have that narrative and have those skills to be able to ask, and especially a lot of you on this call, Chelsea, I know you're an administrator. So being able to say that to a new hire in an interview, right? How that just speaks volumes about, yourself and the company. All right, I want to stop talking. Who else has questions? And if you don't feel comfortable saying them out loud, you can chat them to me individually. I would be happy to ask them on behalf. I know it's still, I don't think it's a new topic, but I think it's new for a lot of us in adapting it into our workspace. And it is so, so important to have the two. At first, when I was telling somebody that we were having this, they were asking, why are you having it's sexuality. It's not professional. I said, it's very professional and very applicable. It goes beyond sexuality. It's how you address somebody. So I know that it is a little nerve-wracking. Again, I've had my own challenges with it as well. So please, you can feel free to chat me. I would be happy to ask any questions. And again, Emily is super open.
Yeah, and to kind of like what you had mentioned earlier in regards to it, and this is why I'm huge on just having very I guess in a nutshell, my 3 core values is inclusion, mindfulness, and intention. And this is something that I apply across the board, no matter what identity I whatever role I'm taking on in whatever space it is. It's being very intentional, being very mindful, and being very inclusive. And these three core values stemmed from both working in an assisted living, like you had mentioned, where it is naturally, especially you made a great point, Ashley, where especially in memory care, for some reason, there is this level of I would say this level of ableism language that we utilize for individuals who have a disability to their mental capacity. And it's almost start creating a space where it's they're less than, they're subhuman, and versus somebody who is able-bodied and has their complete mind and control of what they're doing or what they can and can't do. And those are things that it is. It's I think it's now we have the ability to break down and utilize specific words to then be more deliberate in how we I guess put out the words and the communication to a person. And that's something that I've also learned through the years, is slowing it down to where it's just, as humans, we need to just slow it down, and it's okay to feel awkward. It's okay to have those awkward silences. I would rather have those and have more meaningful conversations than surface level, jargon that doesn't really get us anywhere. And especially coming from the healthcare sector in itself, that's why I'm going back to school for that work, is to create policies around being more intentional and being more mindful, and to challenge this person-centered care, but we really aren't really doing person-centered care. It's just this general umbrella, like, hey, we're going to do it, but what does it really mean to be inclusive? What does it really mean to be in a diversified community? What does it mean to have cultural humility? And those are conversations that I will always continue to have in a lot of the spaces I do share with folks, because it's something that I learned from the queer community, is being intentional and being mindful and being inclusive, because we've been ostracized. We've been excluded from spaces. And like, you know, even here in progressive San Diego, I live in Chula Vista in South Bay, and it's difficult. There's some people who are LGBT friendly, some that aren't. There's actually some drama that's happening this coming weekend for a queer-owned bakery who decided to have a drag, it's their 1-year anniversary, and we have politicians who are just like, oh, you know, there's the drag queen that's basically doing this trivia show, reading answers off, but now there's this huge movement of like anti-drag. It's because of kids and all this other narratives, and it's realizing again, we're still battling those battles of where the spaces aren't accepting of who we are, what our culture is as a queer community member, and drag shows is a part of our culture. It's basically costume, and it is acting and singing. It has nothing to do with what people are saying, which is like pedophilia and all the other stuff. So again, it's like, I appreciate y'all holding space for me to talk about these conversations, because it's very close and near and dear to my heart in general. So thank you, everyone.
Of course. If any of you have not been to a drag show or drag queen bingo, it's the best time to make sure you Uber, because it always ends up that way.
Yeah.
Michael, I did see that you unmuted. Did you have a question?
It was more so a comment rather than a question, but just appreciating you providing, in essence, like a little toolkit in one of your slides, just about how to navigate when addressing or clarifying, whether it be pronouns or anything like that. At least for me personally, I think that just helps in terms of feeling a little bit more confident in that approach. And really just a testament to everything that you're doing. I think it's fantastic, all that you're involved in. I don't know how you get sleep, but no, seriously, continue that, and just very much appreciated. Thank you.
Michael, let's
Thank you.
if we can post that on our LinkedIn as well, so we can share it with the other members, just that little toolkit. That would be awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I can share the slides for the slide deck thing that you can post up there.
Perfect. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Chelsea, I'm definitely going to check that out. I've never heard of Sage Care. So I will absolutely look at that. Is that something that you've seen, Emily?
Yes, I'm familiar with it. Chelsea, do you remember what SAGE stands for?
Yes. Well, hold on. They rebranded recently. Let me.
Yeah, it's like advocacy and service. I just know it's like advocacy and like services for the LGBTQ community. I just don't know if SAGE is an acronym for something or if it's just SAGE.
Services and advocacy for GLBT elders. So is that gay, lesbian, binary?
So the breakdown
transgender. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Lesbian, gay,
Yeah,
bisexual, and transgender. Got it.
Yeah, it's actually now there's an alphabet soup though. It's like I think our most up to date is the LGBTQIA+. And that just intersects where it's all the different sexualities. So it's like lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, intersex, asex, intersexual, and then intersex, and then there's asexual as well. And then the plus, and there's like a bunch of other ones. I'm trying to keep up with it. But it's just LGBT QIA, or just LGBTQ plus usually is what I've heard folks use more recently.
It's interesting that on this Sage Care, I'm just reading the little blurb about Sage Care, that it says GLBT elders and nothing else. I bet that'll change.
Yeah.
Things.
And that's what is it. I think like language is ever evolving. And especially here in progressive San Diego, I mean, that's where progressiveness comes from, is just we're progressing a lot of the narrative, the rhetoric, the language and how we communicate in all sectors and in all identities as well. So I feel there's certain organizations that still need to be up to par. However, at the same time, it's also being mindful that we are in a very privileged space here in San Diego to be able to have the language and the knowledge to be like, oh, we can use the LGBTQIA. And a little bit of the background is it used to be the G and the L swapped because the lesbian community way back when was a huge support during the AIDS movement. So it was kind of like in recognition of that, they kind of swapped it. So there's some organizations where it's the GLBT, but now it's the LGBT, and then in San Diego, it's LGBTQIA plus.
Got it.
Yeah.
So interesting.
All right. Is there any other questions, concerns, or anything like that?
You just did that good of a job explaining.
That's good. I'm glad. And, thank you again, everyone, for, showing up and holding space. And definitely I will continue to be open to have many conversations, like I said, with all my different identities, all my different hats that I wear in this space, and just, just navigating it as intentionally as possible.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Emily. We so appreciate it. We'll make sure to post this on LinkedIn, and I know Emily would be happy to share her information as well. She's they are a great open book. I'm practicing every day.
It's all good. Thank you.
So yeah, we are just wrapping up our meeting, and we will be having a holiday happy hour. We are going to wait until December to do it. We are still confirming our speaker for the next meeting. Our speaker last month, who unfortunately was sick suddenly, that's who we're hoping is going to be speaking on our November 17th meeting. So more to come on that. But Michael, please remind me, just confirm, December 8th is going to be our happy hour, correct?
Correct.
Perfect. So we're going to do a holiday happy hour. We're going to try to keep it central-ish. We were throwing around the idea of North Park. If you have any preferences, any ideas for spaces that you want to go to, please just send me a message. And then also we will go dark for a member meeting in December. We know people have holidays and vacations and all of that. But if there's this topic that you want to hear next year, please reach out to myself, Michael, Alyssa, really anyone on the committee. We're really trying to keep this focused for our members, what's really important and educational for you all. So please just send me a message. Happy to find speakers, even if it's just, I want to hear about cups. I said that because I'm looking at my dirty coffee cup. We can find speakers. We have, between the committee, we have a wealth of contacts. So if you just have an idea, we'd be happy to collaborate on that. Michael, anything else?
No, I think you touched on everything. Just be on the lookout for more details on confirmation for November webinar, and then for our holiday mixer here in December.
Awesome. Thank you. And I just really want to thank you, Emily, again, for taking the time, to talk about this and just being so open. This, I really appreciate you. So, and appreciate your education. But if there's nothing else, I'll give you a couple moments before your lunch. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.